Hi, guys. Welcome to COVID Commentary SLC. I want to thank you guys for joining us tonight. We're going to be covering some pretty historic occurrences in the oil market and a few other important geopolitical events that we've been hearing rumors of, like what's going on in North Korea with Kim Jong-un, which we'll be waiting to hear a lot more about in the future. And also, we've been putting a lot more effort into expanding our Facebook page as well. So go ahead and search us up on Facebook at COVID Commentary SLC, and you can go ahead and join the community. We want to get you guys involved with the show as much as possible. So if you guys have anything interesting that you're hearing, you can post it in that group and get a discussion going, and then that'll hopefully trigger something for us where we can bring that up in the next show. Or we could have you on as a guest. If you feel like you have been doing a lot of research, I would love to have on anybody, really. Anybody. We're us little guys, so if this is something you're interested in, then we'd love to have you on. So before we go ahead and get started, how have you been holding up, CJ? What have you been doing to maintain your sanity through these crazy times?
Actually, I've been holding up pretty good. Been making a lot of really good dinners at home. Just honestly trying to use leftovers to make dinner the next day and make something totally different. Just trying to not really waste stuff. But I mean, on top of that, just the creativity and baking and whatnot. I mean, that's just killing time and in a sense, just like mental therapy. Today it was nice and 75 outside. Went and did some yard work, pulled up some weeds, cleaned up, and I mean, got a little bit of sun. I mean, essentially, I'm trying to get my garden all started ready, so should be good to go here soon.
Yeah, that's really smart. One thing that I hear from Chris Martinson, how he ends every single one of his videos, is he says, "Go ahead and plant a garden." Worst case, you end up learning how to garden, and you get some fresh veggies. But best case, maybe it becomes something that you actually use to help live off of if these times become more turbulent than they are now. Yeah, I really like the way you're seeing that, and I think a lot of people should kind of view this time the way that you are and the way that I've been seeing it, which is learn a new skill. Definitely spend some time going outside and get a lot of sun. Sun's really great for you. And here in Utah, the past couple of days, the sun's been out almost all day, and it's just been waiting there for you to go out and enjoy some of it, get that vitamin D and everything. So yeah, I really like that perspective.
Went fishing 2 days ago, and it's pretty nice, and everybody was kind of keeping their 6 feet. I mean, well more than that even, and wasn't too crowded. Was actually impressed up there at Tibble Fork Reservoir. They had the about half or a little less than half of the parking lot actually completely closed off, so that way they didn't have as many people there, which is actually a really smart idea. Just eliminate the parking altogether, which I've even seen states like California have reopened their beaches but closed their parking lots for their beaches. So that way, if you want to go, cool, you have to take a pretty long walk and pay a meter, or just figure it out somehow, but you're not parking right next to the beach anymore.
That's pretty smart. So did you catch anything while you were out?
Yeah, I actually caught, well, I had a lot of bites, but I caught one little guy, little rainbow trout, so it wasn't a total loss for about 4 hours.
You got him in your freezer right now?
No, I'd feel too bad taking that guy. He was probably about this little bit bigger than my hand.
Oh, I see. Still got a
Lengthwise.
long life ahead of him.
Yeah, but yeah, other than that, just keeping the mind clear, staying busy, and keeping up on any of these Netflix shows. And I have to congratulate America on the fact that the last 2 weeks or so I've gone on and seen the top 10 most viewed shows on Netflix, and there's a weed show that America loves watching, so very impressed.
Really? Yeah, I just barely heard about a show they're releasing. It seems like it's going to be a pretty popular show about psychedelics. So
Yeah, yeah.
Hopefully, we're not scaring off too much of our audience here, but I think that's a pretty interesting topic to explore.
I mean, hell, what a time to do so if you're all safe inside.
Oh yeah, I mean, of course, we don't want to recommend anything like that, but yeah,
No, 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 no. Not at all.
but
I do
yeah,
not
just
recommend or condone.
the whole way that the law views psychedelics, I think, needs to come into question, and the potential beneficial sides to things like that. I know I've had a good amount of interesting insights and kind of blockages cleared out from my own mind from experimenting with that a little bit. Yeah, I've definitely been holding together pretty well, I would say, as far as most people go, because I have kind of been looking into these type of crisis events for a while now. I've been researching the economy for a while, and it's been much more unstable than people really believe, because most people just hear Trump say it's the best economy in the world, and nobody's willing to look at the Fed's balance sheet or look at stock buybacks or any of these things that indicate a really fragile economy. So I feel like I've been almost mentally preparing for something on this scale, something that could really come in and change your day to day routine. So I honestly haven't really, I keep hearing people say like, oh, you're letting fear control your life, and everyone's just being tricked by fear. And I honestly haven't really felt fear this whole time. Maybe if I had kids and stuff to worry about, it might be a little bit different story. But if you're well prepared for this, and I feel like I've gone through the mental motions of realizing, what would happen if I lost my company, what would happen if food was difficult to get at the store, what would happen if the dollar became worth much less. I've kind of gone through all of those things. So for me, this has been a fairly, it's almost relaxing. This is a crisis, but I feel like the way that a lot of people are experiencing it hasn't really felt like a full crisis yet. And I mean, with a lot of people I know that aren't as obsessed with gathering information as people like you and me, they're just kind of going about their day to day business. They kind of just see this as everything's starting to go back to normal, and we're potentially almost over this, and that the economy isn't really going to suffer any major damage from this. Like, my family is even having a family dinner tonight, and I hate to be the kind of the odd man out, but I told my mom I don't think I want to go to this gathering with probably around 8 or more people, of all of us who have been going out, seeing different people. I mean, I've been isolating pretty well. I know my mom and my stepdad have been isolating pretty well, but it's just when all these people get together, it's everybody that all of those people have talked to are now basically all in the same room. And you know what? Chances are everything's going to be just fine, and everyone's going to make fun of me for being too paranoid or whatever. But it's just the fact that you're technically, I don't want to sound too paranoid or too strict here, but technically putting people's lives at stake to have a family dinner. And then what if one person had it there, gave it to 1 or 2 people at the family dinner, and then they went back to their households and gave it back to their households, who have their small chain of people that they see, and it spread from there as well. So it's just such a big thing that, even if chances are slim, we've been doing pretty good here in Utah. Even if chances are slim, I feel like it's a big enough consequence that, personally for me, I'm gonna continue doing the social distancing thing.
Well, yeah, and that's kind of one of those things where you don't want to live in fear, because it's not something that you want to live in fear about, but in a sense, it's something you want to adapt to and learn to live with caution, or more caution, rather than being so susceptible to getting diseases, and just the sanitary aspect of it. Just everybody, you have to remind people to wash their hands after using the restroom and stuff like that, when it's just like it's something that should be common practice in a sense. Like, if we as Americans were more responsible when it comes down to just being resourceful and sanitary, then we wouldn't. I wouldn't say we wouldn't be where we are now, but we would probably be in a different state, and especially if there wasn't the fear and just everybody practice caution. Right now, we have a lot of the back and forth. You have the people that are cautious, that are staying home and self isolating, and pretty much like you and I've gone out a few different places that I've deemed safe. I even went and got a coffee this morning just because still support some locals and try to get stuff that I know won't contaminate me, or that I don't really have a fear of. But that's the thing. It's just people need to exercise caution. The people were wearing gloves where I was, like where I went, they had masks on. So if they're making my drink and they're changing gloves for every drink and they're wearing a mask the whole time, then I mean, essentially, I feel safe enough to go to their restaurant, especially in a sense that now it's a liability. If you're going to stay open right now, then you better make sure that nobody at your restaurant gets sick. And if somebody there that's working is sick, you best make sure that you take whatever measures that have to be taken in order to avoid some sort of outbreak from one sort of source. I mean, you in a sense, it's one of those things that people almost have to take a chance, on in their day-to-day lives regardless. But the the downfall, or I almost feel like the majority of Americans are in this rush and hurry to just, okay, cool, we've been closed this long, and it's time to get things back to normal, instead of, okay, we've been closed this long, not much has changed, maybe we should, stick to the plan, instead of putting a date out there, instead of saying, hey, by Easter we'll open, by May 1st we'll open, by May 15th we'll open. Instead of putting some sort of number on it, that's the problem with what the government's done at this point. They keep putting numbers on it, and expectations for the people in every single state are just rising. They're like, okay, you guys said 2 weeks ago we'd be open. Now we're still closed. So, are you just toying with us? Because I want to get back to my regular life. And that's where the issue is. I mean, it's like the United States of America, to begin with, they did not take it seriously. It's like we're just this great world power, and as a nation, we've had our hands in all these countries' messes, and we I can't even count how many wars and how many things that had absolutely nothing to do with the American government that we've gone and shoved our hands in and made sure that we've had something to do with it. And in a sense, we've showed a lot of power because we've been extremely dependable and strong, and we, for the most part, I mean, like I said earlier when we were talking, America's like the cool brother, and just talks to the little countries, plays nice, and helps them clean up any messes that are left behind. And that's kind of where we were for the last over 100 years or so, able to find solutions and solve problems, and regardless of any sort of difficulty or any sort of war or famine, or regardless of the severity of the case, we've been able to jump on top of it. And it's leaving us a homeland that's usually safe, free, and fair. But we're as a country, we're definitely far from perfect. And it's now 5 months or so after the world's been on lockdown, and we're comfortable living in a life in isolation and quarantine. But there's a lot of people that live in fear, and that's what resulted in store shelves being emptied and shortages. And we've all tried to really stay home and flatten the curve, and it showed some progress, but it's really just kind of leveled out our daily cases. We're still seeing upwards of 80,000 to 100,000 cases worldwide. And, every single day, the U.S. is on the top of that list when it comes down to deaths, when it comes down to cases, when it comes down to, and you have to give us the benefit of the doubt that we are reporting that we're testing more people than, any other country, but also we are reporting more cases than any other country, and the percentage wise it's a little bit ridiculous. So it's like after all this time living in fear and being super careful and sanitary, um, now we're all talking about reopening states and bringing life back to normal. People are starting to protest and litter the state offices and governments and do all these daily strikes, and people are lining up in cars, and nobody's self-distancing, nobody's wearing masks, and really at this point people are just starting to give in and just say, okay, well, we can't live that way. And they're really worried. Mostly what I've heard is just about the economy. It's just all about the economy. Like, wow, if we keep going like this, we're gonna be in such bad shape. But it's one of those things that right now, regardless, we are going to be in bad shape. We'll be in bad shape, 12 months from now, 24 months from now, most likely up to 3 or 4 years until this shit flattens out and we get to a good point. And that's going to take a lot of years of testing viruses. I know that we just recently actually I read an article about a guy that jumped up when they said, okay, we need to start testing vaccines, and he said, cool, I'll be the first one, test me. And we're going to start seeing a lot of that because people just want to get back to regular everyday life. But it's like, the truth is, if we just open up and are so flexible with everything, then it's going to result in an even worse spike. We're going to be doubling probably what we're doing now, in a sense. If we were to reopen if we reopened for 14 days, 2 weeks, then it would spread that much to where we'd probably start resulting in up to 70 to 80,000 cases a day just in the United States. And that's where the real issue is going to happen. Now, once you start seeing those numbers, we're going to start seeing total shutdowns, and then our economy is going to go from this this little dip that it's at, it's gradually going down, up, down right now. But when you put this false narrative around, okay, everything's getting better, it's almost cushioning the the minds of the American people to believing okay, we just got to keep moving forward, and that's going to put everything back to normal. And really, it's not going to go any different. I almost want to write the U.S. government and just go off on them and do a what's it called, Rick and Morty rant, and just be you got to get your shit, get it together. I don't care if you find a shit museum, put it in a backpack. I don't give a shit. Just find somewhere, get your shit together, and figure it out. And that's absolutely dead on for what every single government should be doing. It shouldn't be hey, what's our plan to reopen? That's the stupidest way of looking at something that's not taken care of. It's not been cured. It's not been, there is no vaccine. All there is this, take precaution, wear a mask, 6 feet, wear gloves. And there's going to be probably, 60% of people that, or 60 to 70, I would say, that are probably going to be going out without masks and just going back to their daily life. I know for a fact that Trolley Winco, they're talking about opening really soon and having people sitting at their tables again. And I just think that's such a stretch. You're willing to open up your business, and I understand all these businesses want to stay afloat, and the government's running out of money to give all these businesses, but still, you got to think of the long-term, reaction to all this. It's going to really end up in this downhill, fall if we just start opening everything right now. People need to stay at home, keep their cautions up, and, stay the same sanitary, only go to the grocery store when you need to, only go out when you really need to, or somewhere that you're going to be in your car. You don't have to walk around people. Pay with your card. Fucking quit using cash, people. It's how many hands cash goes through and how many strippers' asses it's been on. There's no way in hell the dollar bill that you have in your wallet is clean, and you could easily spray your damn card off or wipe it off, and that makes it clean. So
Yeah, like you were saying, a lot of things you just said definitely just got my mind going about how we're in this fourth turning society. I'm so glad I learned that theory because it just explains this all so well, and everything's just matching up so well. I don't this The reason I think we're gonna have a bigger second outbreak is basically because the average person has not gotten respect for this crisis yet. They haven't had it impact them to a point where they're like, holy shit, this is a real thing to worry about. So, and because our society has so little reserves in every aspect, you know, as far as food storage, as far as keeping a healthy um, like not having debt as households and as businesses. We're just not really doing any of that. So when this thing comes along that makes us have to shelter up and really put our guard up for a month, 2 months, we just don't have the reserves for something like that. So immediately everyone's mind goes to, all right, we need to make this go away. We need to go back to the way things were because we were already having a hard time paying our bills before. But now that this is coming through, we've already used up all of our reserves and we need things to open back up. Restaurants need things to go back to normal, movie theaters, these places that have been hit so hard. They, and they're not virologists. They aren't looking at the numbers like we are every day. They're just looking at their everyday life and being like, hey, I don't know anyone that died, especially here in Utah. I don't know anybody that's died. Maybe know one person that had it and probably got over it. This is obviously being hugely blown up by the media. They're not looking at what's going on in China or in Italy or in the UK or most people aren't looking at what's happening across the globe. They're just seeing what's happening in their immediate vicinity and thinking that everyone's overreacting, thinking that it's the government trying to take advantage of them, which the government is trying to take advantage, but they're just jumping on the opportunity. They're not over exaggerating this virus. That this virus is extremely dangerous, and any country that hasn't really respected that has gotten themselves into a lot of trouble. And luckily, we did shut down in the US at a good enough time, and especially in Utah, to where we have been able to flatten the curve. The way that I thought things were going, so I will admit that I have been at least a little bit wrong because I pictured this basically just taking off to levels that would completely overrun the hospitals and people would just be dying left and right. And luckily, we have actually flattened the curve a little bit, but that's all we've done. We've just flattened this to a somewhat of a sustained level, you could say that, where our hospitals aren't getting too overwhelmed. I have been keeping an eye on the serious or critical cases, and it was rising up through 5K, 6K, 7K. This is all people that need ICU beds, and we were at 14K for a while, and now we're pushing 15K, and it seems like that number isn't accelerating so much anymore. So that is really great news because that means that the hospital system will likely be able to keep up through this whole thing. But the thing that I feel like is almost a certainty that's going to happen is places are going to open up too soon, and the second outbreak is going to be much worse than the first one. And looking back at the Spanish flu, that's exactly what we saw.
yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where we we really do need to focus our resources on these hard hit places like New York and Michigan and California, Washington, Florida, and all these big, I guess we can call them corona hubs where this virus is just multiplying and infecting more and more people. And in a sense, if we keep the stay-at-home order going, I would just, if I was the governor, Herbert, I'd just call a stay-at-home order until the end of the summer. Keep everybody just home. Hell, do some work home projects, whatever. While other states, may need to be completely shut down, but that's the thing. Like, we don't want to get to a point where we need those resources, because right now we're sending away nurses to other states. Like, we're literally putting nurses on flights that are going to other hospitals in different states that they've never worked at before, just to help at the front line. So when it comes down to it, if there's all these outbreaks and then we start to reopen, we may set ourselves up for failure there.
Yeah, I almost, I mean, the world's so big. Definitely some place, some state, some country is going to think they got it handled, and they're, potentially going to send resources to somebody else, and then they're going to get hit with it when they thought they already had it under control. I mean, that's for sure, that's going to happen somewhere. It's just, is it going to be a global phenomenon? Is the globe going to get caught by the second wave, just caught totally unguarded? And the thing is, we've been at this for what seems like forever already. Like I said, reserves are running low. People's temperaments are running low. We're already seeing tons of protests. We haven't really seen any like civil unrest so far, any like stores getting robbed or anything like that, any major supply chain disruptions. But who knows what the future holds. I mostly am worried about the second wave, and we just can't keep going the way that we're going. The economy is taking too big of a hit, and our economy is just not built to slow down. I heard from one of the podcasts I listened to that the economy, the global economy, has been priced to perfection, which basically means that the way people have invested is they expected things to go smooth continuously, basically. Why? Because that's the most profitable way to invest. You want to be all in. If you're all in and you're right, then you're going to make a bunch of money. If you're kind of cautious and you're like, okay, let me be a little bit more resilient rather than profitable, and kind of keep more of my money in precious metals and bonds and things like that, you're going to miss out on a lot of the profit. And so people get that fear of missing out, and everybody just goes all in, and then the virus comes along. That's where we were. Everybody was all in. Nobody was expecting catastrophe. And why? Because you get perception. People's perception is that nothing bad's going to ever happen. And then the people that say, wait, isn't this a little unsafe? Isn't this, what if something comes and rocks the boat, And then there's people who are wrong for years and years. People have been saying the economy is going to collapse since 2011. And why? Because it's super unstable. But somehow we managed to keep it afloat for the past decade with more printed money. And all the people that have been saying how unstable it is, they're locked up in their shell right now because they've been proven wrong for the past decade. They all feel really stupid, and everyone's been making fun of them, and they missed out on this stock market bubble. But yet they were technically right. We just happened to be able to survive on the drugs for another decade before we got the hangover. And this virus coming through, I mean, I couldn't have pictured anything more perfectly targeted at destroying this unstable economy, specifically because the time horizon of it, it's just months and months and months. And if you don't obey that shutdown, that restriction, that contraction, if you try to disobey it, you're going to start having people dying, and you're going to be severely punished from that. So
Yeah. I mean, have you, I don't know if I didn't even really talk to you about this one, but I know you've seen it. The mayor of Las Vegas interview.
oh yeah, you sent me that. You want to talk us through that a little bit?
Oh, man. Yeah, I didn't even plan on it, but I just thought about it, and I was like, okay, yeah, I got to touch on this idiot. We don't try to steer any sort of political views, any sort of direction, but when it comes down to it, I don't care what this woman's political party is. She's just borderline dumb. I mean, the mayor of Las Vegas is essentially saying that she's leaving it up to the casinos on if they want to be open or not, and basically giving them all the green light to allow people to start opening up and booking rooms. And it's when she was asked, like, okay, how are you going to make sure that these casinos are sanitary and, people keep their distance and all this and whatnot? And her response was, well, I don't own a casino, so I can't tell you that. That's not up to me. That's up to the casinos to figure out. And it just shocked me. I'm like, this lady's just like, well, I'm just telling them they could open. I don't own a casino. She even said, I wish I owned a casino. I'm not a business owner. I have no idea how it works. But she said basically that she doesn't want uh, the pandemic essentially to ruin the Las Vegas economy for the summer. That is one of the best top destinations in the world during the summer. To suffer. So she's essentially trying to push for this reopen. Thankfully, the governor of Nevada has a good head on his shoulders, and he's basically saying well, let's take a step back, and I don't know about that one. So we'll see. I mean, uh, hotels like Treasure Island are starting to accept reservations for May 15th, and I just think that's ridiculous. Are you gonna go in and remove every two um, uh, uh, slots, like slot machines? Like, are you just going to get rid of slot machines altogether? Are you going to sanitize every single deck of cards before you deal those cards out? Or the dealer is going to be wearing gloves? Are you going to be able to smoke in there? Like, same thing with drinks. Like, are you going to be able to drink all the germs that go with the drinks? Like, right now in Utah, you can't just sit at a bar and get a drink. Like, could you imagine if in Las Vegas you could sit down and get a bar, at a bar and get a drink right now? That'd be ridiculous. Especially with all these stimulus checks, everybody's gonna rush to Vegas. Right now is the time where everybody is still sort of in panic mode, and I'm sure most of the people that are pushing for states to open are pushing for cities to open or counties or whatever, or have this mentality that, okay, we need to hurry up and get what we can while we can, so that way, when it does hit, because I don't think that they understand the severity of it. And there's a lot of people that are saying oh, it's just a freaking cough. You know what? Everybody's gonna get it, and everybody's gonna be fine. 95% of these people are not gonna die, and anybody that is gonna die are those who are at high risk, and just blatantly saying that people that are high risk should just stay home. Could you imagine if we made every single child stay home and not have human interaction with another child, up until this thing's completely over? It's gonna mess
Well,
with a lot of kids'
children
heads.
are definitely in the low risk category.
Well, they're saying it's back and forth. If you're, I guess I'm saying if you're a high risk child,
Oh, I see what you're saying.
yeah,
Okay.
if you're because there's a lot of my cousin has a disability. I'm not exactly sure what it's called. It's got some really crazy long name, but essentially he's there, but he's almost in a vegetative state, and he's he's been alive and he's been like that for 12 years now, which is ridiculous. They gave him 6 months to live after he was born, and she will not let any of her kids leave the house. She has two other kids, and her one son wants to be an EMT and was training to do that, was going to school to do that, and all the above. And she basically said, okay, you can do your school from home. You cannot do any of your volunteer hours. You're not allowed to go to the hospital. You're not allowed to do anything else. Basically, you're staying home, and I'm going to the store for you. Took away his keys.
Okay, so yeah, on with back to what you were talking about with what's going on with the mayor in Las Vegas. Because if we're being honest, businesses rule the world right now. Corporations rule the world, and what do they want to do? They want to get back to making money because things were going quite well with them before. Low interest rates, easy money from the Fed, high consumption from Americans. They basically just want things to get back to normal. And a lot of them, there's so much misinformation out there right now about this virus that if you're a business owner and you come across something that's saying this is no big deal or saying that the media is just overplaying it, you're just going to go ahead and believe that because it's what fits your narrative. It's what takes things in the direction you want to go. I would say the voice saying the real facts about the virus, like Chris Martenson and a couple other analysts that are really seeing the nitty gritty of what happens to this virus when left unguarded against. If things open up entirely, just how devastating this can be, and most people just really don't fully grasp that because they've seen that things have kind of slowed down. We're not seeing massive deaths, and they just don't really make that connection that the deaths and the cases are kind of low. I wouldn't even say they're low, but they're not devastating just because we've taken some necessary precautions and shut things down. And then there's the other side of it where if we continue to take these precautions, the economy is going to experience some things that we've never seen before, some very large disturbances. There's going to be the dominoes collapsing on mortgages, which is going to set off so many other things. And just the simple fact that we are bringing all the trade back, for all the manufacturing back from China into the US, which I think is going to be a huge topic over the next coming decade. Just that alone is enough to shake up the economy, which has built its debt around us being a consumption-based economy and China being a manufacturing-based economy. I actually have a little bit more on that later. We can go ahead and dive into that a little bit deeper. But before we go along too much, let's go ahead and touch a little bit on the numbers that we touch on every show. We are just about to break 3 million cases worldwide. I was kind of hoping that we'd break 3 million on the show so we could have a little mini party or whatever, but it's kind of, as with most nights, yeah, as with most nights, it kind of people stop reporting at nighttime. So the numbers are kind of chilling right now at 2.994 million. So we're about 5,300 cases from being 3 million worldwide, which is about 10 times the cases that we had when we first started doing the show a couple weeks ago. So, I feel like the way people are seeing these cases is any number you tell them, you can write it off somehow. Like, okay, so we have 3 million cases, but then people are just going to say, well, there's 7 billion people in the world, 3 million, such a tiny percentage. And back when there was like 100,000 cases, people were saying the same thing. So tons of cases. We just passed 200,000 deaths. I believe that was yesterday. We passed that, and still less than 1 million recovered. So one of the biggest statistics that me and CJ have been focusing on here is the outcomes of the closed cases, which out of 1 million, just over 1 million closed cases, 81% of them have recovered and 19% of those have died. So that number did get up to, I believe, 23. Yeah, it has gone down. So, and that's what we were expecting. That's basically what everyone's been expecting. Something has been keeping it up. It was for a while there. I think about like one day it got up to 23%. And then right after it got there, it kind of dropped down to 22 and then, made its way down to 20. And now it's at 19. And we should see that go down well below 10%. The death rate should be under 10% for sure. And one thing I did want to point out, actually real quick, if we click on USA here, that same closed case statistic, it is going down in the US as well. This number has looked pretty bad in the US. It was up over 35% of cases were ending in death of the cases that we know of. Of course, it's always important to point that out because there's who knows how many cases we don't know of happening that are recovering just fine. But yeah, that was at 35%. It is dropping down to 32%, which is still really awful. I mean, you're not going to hear that reported in the media anywhere. But that, a third of all the cases that we know of have ended in death. That is really insane. And today, it's a Sunday, and yesterday was a Saturday. So a trend that I noticed a week or two ago was that for some reason the deaths and the case count drops every weekend, every Saturday and Sunday. So, and then I heard Chris Martenson point out that same thing. So it's a real trend that is starting to appear. And if you look at the graph that shows the case counts and deaths daily, it goes up and then it drops almost down by 20-30% every weekend. So what does that mean? Of course, the coronavirus isn't taking a break every Saturday and Sunday. All that means is that our testing capacity, and it's strange because the deaths go down too. Now, how revealing is that? Because people aren't dying less on Saturday and Sunday, but yet the death count goes down. And, if we combine that with everything we've heard about how some people aren't being tested when they die at home, and the fact that deaths go down on weekends, so that means basically that a whole bunch of people are dying and we're just not testing them. And that goes down on the weekends because, people have a day off or whatever. So, whatever reason, it just really shows that our ability to test is just simply not keeping up with this virus.
I mean, in my opinion, people just think it's the weekend. They don't want to get tested on the weekend. Let's wait till Monday.
Well, that could be it. But like you said, there's like kind of a 2 or 3 day lag from where you get your results. So you'd think that would kind of move it to like Monday or whatever. It's probably, yeah, who knows what it could be, but yeah, for sure, every weekend it goes down. And today we had 1,100 deaths in the U.S., which I guarantee we're going to be seeing in the headlines coming this week of, deaths way down. Deaths are half of what they were or whatever. Because yesterday we had over 2,000. We almost hit 3,000 the other day. And I guarantee tomorrow that's going to be up in the 2,000s again. And, just to kind of prove Trump wrong here real quick, he was saying, because they were talking about when this was first happening, they were saying we're going to see 100 to 200,000 deaths in America. And then they came back recently and said, oh, we way over guessed that. We're definitely not going to hit 100 to 200,000. We're going to hit it about 50 or 60,000. And we're already at 55,000 confirmed deaths. Likely, I believe that number in the U.S. is well over 70,000, but we're already at 55,000. We're going to be past 60,000 in no time. And, and that's just going to be one more thing that the White House has gotten wrong through this because they're trying to keep perception good. And I think we're going to see a breaking point where that perception just falls through and people realize how big of a shock this is. And I think that's going to kind of coincide with the next stock market crash we're going to see in the next week or two.
Yeah, I mean, that stock market crash, I mean, it's just inevitable at this point. It's everybody's gotten their business loans and everybody's gotten their their stimulus checks, their Trump money, if they say, and everybody's gonna be everything's gonna be all right for a second. So I mean, I'm totally with you. Within 2 to 3 weeks, it's gonna be really this downhill roller coaster. Like right now would not be the time to throw any of the money that you have into the stock market or anything like that. I mean,
yeah, I mean, what we just experienced is a very common event called a bear market rally, which when the stock market crashes, basically every time it crashes pretty abruptly and then it goes back up. Why? Because it had all this momentum beforehand, and people think that the crash is just like a fluke, like everyone just got scared for a second. So they're like, wait, no, hold up. Let's see if we can get everything go back to normal. And then, it's so low, so everyone's trying to take advantage of that. So they all buy, and then that causes it to go up for several weeks. And then it starts to really sink in like, oh my gosh, look at how many people are unemployed. You look at the earnings reports coming out of these companies. It's just devastating. And then, institutional investors, they know this bear market rally way better than I do. So they're like, okay, we went up and then right now we're to the point where that second rally is leveling out, and then I think institutional investors are going to be like, all right, we're going to see the next drop. They're going to start selling, and then that's going to trigger even more selling. And then the real world is really going to set in where, the Dow's going to get new lows. I think for sure the Dow's going to get new lows. S&P is going to get new lows. We're probably going to be somewhere around 15K here in the next couple weeks. And something I've been hearing recently, which is really fascinating because I hear so many investors I listen to, they say the Fed's been propping everything up. The Fed's been putting the money in that's been keeping the market up. But if you really look at it, the amount that the Fed can do is actually really small. But it's a psychological game they're playing. They want investors to believe that they have their back, but they really do not have the firepower to really prop this market up in a time of emergency. We've already seen that when, the Dow dropped 30 or 40%. It definitely can do that. And then the Fed stepped in various different ways to try and keep it propped up. And they basically gave everyone confidence that, we have your back. But from things I've been hearing from investors, or from really people way smarter than me, is they're saying that they can't actually really fully prop this up. If it wants to crash, it's gonna crash. It's just a matter of confidence. And if people lose that confidence, there's actually no amount of money printing that could fix this. It's just that people believe that the Fed can fix things, and they can fix certain things. They can fix small targeted things, but they cannot fix the crash that I believe and that many people believe is going to be coming through here.
And I mean, that's kind of like one of the things that's inevitable. You have, the first round of small business loans that were sucked up, within, I say a matter of a week, that all that money was gone. And now we're on to the second round, and this time it's 200 billion of small business loans to, help dig people out. But also, like this round, there's really not much talk of, how are we going to keep each American stimulated as well. And you shared that post about possibly getting, $10,000 and then taking it off as a year towards Social Security, and just take it off the back, so that way you just retire 1 year later, or you get 1 year less, or however you want to play it out. And I think that is almost an ideal situation, in a sense, because it's one of those things that if you gave the American people the opportunity, it would be something that they could opt in for or opt out. And that funding is, it would be coming from where it would already be coming from, like we could take that out of Social Security, in a year, that would end up building itself back up as long as we get back on track. And I mean, I'm totally for something like that in that sense. I don't like the idea of giving every American a $10,000 check off the bat, because we're Americans and we're compulsive and we buy ridiculous things that have absolutely no meaning just because we have the money to do so. And even in a time like this where people are like, oh man, things are never going to be back to the same, like I just want to live my life. Like if we threw everybody $10,000, there'd be so many brand new cars on the road, and so many brand new boats, and you couldn't get anybody to sit still. So I mean, in my sense, I think even just a 5-month gradual, or 5 to 6 month gradual of $2,000 a month, as well as a separate fund that would contribute a $500 a month towards food stamps, just food and groceries.
Yeah, and just so our listeners are aware, the $10,000 check that CJ is talking about is something I posted in the Facebook group, and it's something I heard from Jason Burak from Wall Street from Main Street, and he heard it from Kyle Bass, which is actually a really reputable source. And the post he made was, I'm working with government officials to put together this Eagle plan where we're going to give Americans $10,000 right off the bat, basically. And in my mind, that shows how desperate things are. I mean, I've been hearing from a lot of people that the 1,200, for some people that is not going to even make a dent. And the plan you're talking about, the 2,000 a month or whatever, it sounds better. But if we're talking about some of these higher living expenses places like California or New York, or their rent's several $1,000s to begin with, and their car is probably $1,000, and whatever else they have, they probably spend $5,000 a month just to get by. And even the 2,000 might not be nearly enough to keep some of these people from defaulting on their loans. So I think what they're thinking is we just need to get money out to people. And even if they do spend it on some dumb stuff, at least when people buy dumb stuff, they pay taxes on their dumb stuff, unless I think you commented, like, if you're addicted to drugs or something, you're going to spend $10,000 on it.
Crackhead's gonna have a heyday, dude.
Yeah, exactly. And some people really might do that, but yeah, it's crazy what we're having to see as far as these bailouts, and what inflation, what type of inflation this is going to cause. Because one of the big arguing points why we haven't seen tons of inflation yet is because all the bailouts have been going to asset prices. They've been going to stock markets. They've been going into the housing, and so it's kind of, and that makes people money. So in that sense, people are like, yeah, bring on the inflation. If we're inflating my 401k, if we're inflating my stock portfolio, then yeah, bring that on. But we're giving money, I mean, already we've given 1,200 to everybody, and these small business loans, I know I could qualify for about $20,000, which I'm going to do, and hopefully I get it. And if I do get it, I'm either just going to pay all my taxes with that, because you don't have to pay that money back. And honestly, my business hasn't been that hurt. But something I heard from what's his name, the hedge eye guy, he had a guest on, and she said, if the government's giving you money, you take it. Okay, you don't turn that money down. Because why? Because everybody else is taking it. And it honestly creates this cascading effect where if you don't take money from the government, then you're at a disadvantage. So then it incentivizes everybody to try and get as much money as they can. And there's already been reports of tons of businesses, like I know Shake Shack is one of them, business I'm not too familiar with, but they're not a small business. They have the rule is you have to have less than 500 employees per location. So what location has more than 500 employees in it? So basically Walmart qualifies for these small business loans. Mostly the people who have gotten a bunch of money, from what I've heard, has been publicly traded companies, large companies who have kind of a relationship, with people in the government or whatever, and they ended up kind of sucking all this money up. And I heard, I don't know exactly how accurate this is, but I heard like 1 out of every 15 truly small business got any money from these loans, and they were basically sucked up by all the larger companies. I know Shake Shack did announce that they're going to give it back because they're worried about people boycotting them, and yeah, I'm going to try to apply for it, and I'm either going to just pay my taxes, which is kind of really odd because that would mean the government's giving me money to pay my taxes, or I'm just going to take all that money and just buy gold.
Well, I had read one report that said it was over basically $100 million from the small business loan package that was essentially delegated amongst $1 million companies that make millions, that their dividends protect them from in a time like this. And they're gonna see everything jump back. They have literally made millions and millions and millions, and now they're instead of making 50 billion this year or 50 million this year, they're maybe they're only going to make 35. As funny as it sounds, that's scaring these companies, and that's why they're grabbing for, okay, cool, you know what, we could do this for every location, we could nickel and dime this thing, we could get as much as we can out of this. And like you said, if the government's giving you money, you're not going to say no to it. And I mean, 9 times out of 10, if you don't think that you qualify, I mean, hell, I know people that, haven't filed their taxes, that, weren't planning on filing their taxes at all, that have gone on and filed their taxes just to make sure they got a check, because they wanted to make sure that they got the money that they could get. And, if they're giving out these business loans and, what, no interest rate, or, no real, time to pay it back, then, all these companies are going to grab up on it. And we need to find some way to delegate that, because like, companies like your company, even though, like you're saying, you haven't been hurt that bad, but still it would be nice to have that, to know you stay afloat, to, pay off, I don't know, make truck payments and make, other shit like that you have to take care of,
Yeah, it's interesting because so far I definitely don't need the money. I mean, my installer, he's messaging me all the work he's been doing. My brother, who owns the company with me, and you know what? He's been bringing in basically the same amount that we were before this. But yet you would just feel missing out if you didn't take advantage of this, and everyone else was taking advantage of it. So you're going to. And one phrase I'm really glad I learned while I was listening to all these investor podcasts I've been listening to, is moral hazard. And that is exactly what we've been cultivating as a nation for the past decade, 2 decades. Is we're basically giving people the wrong kinds of incentives, and we're rewarding behavior that should not be rewarded. So for those of you who don't know what moral hazard is, it's basically so all of the banks and all of the companies that were making bad decisions back in 2008, they should have gone bankrupt. It would have been better for our economy if they all went bankrupt. And businesses today, like, there's probably some restaurants that were going to go bankrupt before this, but now that the government's handing out a bunch of money, they can postpone that bankruptcy, because they're just going to take that money and basically write everything off as the coronavirus. So this moral hazard has just really created this environment where the people that should be succeeding are not succeeding, and it's just creating such an inefficiency in our government, or in our nation. And I think that's going to be one of these things that just really needs to clear out through this whole process, and is we're going to have to see some of that moral hazard, be accounted for before this crisis is truly over.
Yeah, and I mean, I think in the long term, it needs to come down to, the, in between average American, so to say, that we need to, and, anything below that we need to keep supporting and trying to, keep on track. And there are, plenty of businesses that are helping their employees stay on track. And I know there's several employees that are paying salaries, even at this point, are paying weekly just salaries that don't add up to the hours that they're working, but still just want them to stay afloat. I know that Nissan downtown, that my brother works at, is guaranteeing him $1,500 a week, and he only works there 8 hours the entire week. So in a sense, like, there's a lot of companies that are taking care of people in a time like this. And that's one of those things to where if they, as a dealership, were one of the people that got us the small business loan, which I'm sure they did, and they're doing something like that, then I have absolutely no problem with it.
Yeah, and that reminds me of a different aspect of moral hazard, which is basically what we're creating here with the unemployment, because there's a large group of people that, first of all, nobody wants to work. So if you can make 75% of what you were making while you were working, if you can make that on unemployment, then that's going to be really tempting. You're going to be like, well, okay, I'm not quite as well off as I was before, but I can get by, and now I have 8 hours free every day. And then there's another group of people who are actually making more than they were on unemployment. And that is the definition of moral hazard, because you're rewarding people for not working, and you're basically creating this mindset that they don't need to work. And this we're just heading in this direction more and more and more, and we're going to keep running into more problems, and the government is going to keep offering up whatever solution they have to try and fix this. And basically, because they don't want to go through the shit that we have to go through. They don't want the bankruptcies and the lower GDP. And part of that has to do with we're in such intense competition with all the other countries in the world. If we show short-term weakness, then it's going to make us look bad. It's going to make us kind of not come in first in this competition that we've been always coming in first in. But yet it's this need for this short-term gain that's really it's just stacking up more and more problems that we're going to have to face in the long term.
By chance, did you watch SNL last night?
I saw a clip with Brad Pitt playing Fauci. Was it that one?
I think so. It was just basically I got to get to it now. Hold on, lost my thought. But it was just comparable to what you were saying. It was like, oh yeah. So it was like, America right now we have drug addict parents. We're the kid that, needs CPS to come in and needs, somebody else to, step up and take care of us. And in a sense, like, we almost need another country to adopt us, or just somebody that's going to give us some sort of guidelines, because right now the United States is, running around with their head chopped off and, hoping they hit the finish line, when in a sense they're, going the opposite direction. They're nowhere near. So, I think, which, I mean, it was meant almost as a joke, but in a sense, we really do need to start looking at what other countries that are, having more favorable results, countries like Canada, like, they pretty much seem, they've seen their outbreak, but they potentially have it under control. And, there's other places too, like places like Netherlands that popped, and, you saw a lot of cases all at once. Like, you see their death rate, like Canada's death rate right now currently is 13%. And, they've had 17,000 recovered. They only have 46,000 cases, and I mean, obviously they have a significantly different population than the United States, but from that sense, we really do as a country need to take steps back. And that's something that I wish that our national leaders, our government would, do, is take that step back and almost, raise your hand and ask the teacher for help and say, okay, this isn't working for us. Let's take some notes. Can I sit next to you in class? Can we get tutored? You're handling this and you're passing this class with flying colors, and we're absolutely failing it. And I think that's like a great way to put it. Like, we just need not necessarily a country to piggyback on, but we need a country to tutor us, to take us under their wing, and put us in that right direction. Like, I just feel like there are certain countries that are handling this responsibly and reporting things, believable, rather than just jumping on board with this. Okay, we don't want to freak everybody out.
Yeah, and it's because in the U.S. here we have this belief that we're the best, and it's and that we're like invulnerable or something. We're indestructible, and it's that very belief that's giving us such bad numbers and such a bad outcome with this. And if we were willing to step down from that egotistical view, then maybe we would have a better outcome. And I think we're going to be knocked back a couple pegs throughout this, and hopefully we can. I know a lot of countries in the world are also in they've been going into too much debt. They've been pretty much following the US model, But yeah, there's probably a couple countries out there that aren't trying to constantly be the best, the very best, and tossing everything to the wayside and taking as much risk as possible. They're being more pragmatic and responsible. I'm sure they're out there, and even if there's not, we could just learn by becoming more resilient rather than trying to come out on top of every single situation. But let's go
Yeah,
ahead.
I mean, yeah, it's like we're all in a classroom, like share notes with everybody. Don't keep all the information to yourself, and don't try to pretend like you're the best and smartest one in the class. Like, this is a global crisis, a global pandemic, and something that needs to be handled in a global sense. Like, I have heard very little, like, from a UN standpoint, and that's something that I think should be happening. I think all these countries should be sitting down, like, what's our plan altogether globally?
Yeah, and unfortunately, during these times of crisis, everyone kind of backs into their own country and their own worldview, and kind of just tries to handle things themselves. But I say let's go ahead and move on to some of these other things we have. One thing I really wanted to touch on was what happened in the oil markets, because that was truly a historic event. It's never happened before in the history of trading. The WTI crude oil went below zero. I followed it all the way down. I woke up and my stepdad sent me a text that said it was down to 15. I was like, what? Because it was last show I was talking about how it made new lows at 18. And I actually did say, I was kind of joking, but on last show, I did say oil would be free, but before this was over. And my stepdad texted me and said it was at 15. And by the time I checked, it was at 10. And I sent him a message. I was like, wait, no, it's at 10 actually. And then I started sending messages to everyone. I was sending pictures to CJ. I was sending them to Troy, to my stepdad. I sent one to my dad and my brother just because it's such a historic thing going on. Most people ignored me because they don't really know what's going on. But it broke 10, and I was checking it every few minutes. It went down to 8, 9, 5, 1, and then it stopped at 19 cents for a long time. I was like, oh my gosh. So we're talking 19 cents for 42 gallons of oil is what that's going for. So we're talking less than a penny
And that's
for a
crude
gallon of
oil.
oil.
It's not a actual gasoline at that point. But just because people do get confused when it comes down to, like, you're like, when people say, like, oh, the oil industry, like, this is oil that's being turned into fuel, it's being turned into petroleum, it's being turned into other things.
Yeah, and the thing about this price, I mean, most people only care about the price that they see at the pump. This is the price that people are speculating on and trying to make money on the changes in price. And of course, this price is always going to be lower than what we see at the pump because you buy it for 40, you sell it for 60. There's always a markup and there's transportation costs and all that. But it went down to 19, and then I checked it again and it was at negative 20. So how does that happen? How does the price of oil get to negative 20? So basically what happened here is there's tons and tons of people speculating on this oil WTI futures contract. It's called a futures contract because they're trading these contracts which are a promise to accept oil in the future at sometime in May, I believe, is what this recent contract was trading for. And so there's so many people making bets in this market, especially because prices have been historically low right now. So, there's, like I said last show, there's traders just waiting like wolves to just pounce on this price and ride it all the way up. And, there's people making misguided judgments because even though the price is low, who's to say it can't go even lower? So some people thought they could take advantage of this and they all piled into this. And then the day that it dropped to negative 37 was what it actually hit. That was the second to last day to get rid of this contract before you actually had to accept physical delivery of that oil. So each contract is 1,000 barrels of oil, so 42,000 gallons of oil that these people were trading with no intention of ever actually accepting the oil, but they were trading in it. And then, shit hit the fan and they had to get rid of it, which is kind of funny because what happened the next day. So these people saw that the biggest reason why they weren't able to get rid of it was because the storage tanks have all been filling up. So there's nowhere else to really put all this oil. So the people they decided on the second to last day, you know what? I need to get rid of this right now. I'm willing to pay somebody thousands and thousands of dollars to take this oil off my hand. And ironically, the very next day, the price shot back up to like 12. So if they would have had the cojones to just wait one more day and come that close to the wire of actually having to physically accept it, the price actually did go back up a decent amount. So somebody out there made a shitload of money by just buying it the second to last day and then selling it the last day. So, they made a huge spread on that. But like I said, historic event, probably it could happen again next month around the 20th, or I'm not exactly too familiar with the dates. Somewhere around the 20th, it starts to get close to where that month's contract ends. So we may see that same thing happen again, but this really caught a lot of people, by surprise. They weren't ready. Nobody was really thinking that oil could actually go negative. And this right here gives you a peek at what can happen when we have this leveraged system where there's so many people involved in every commodity in every part of the economy, where everybody's making bets on things. It's not just things being traded. There's people behind the scenes making bets on the things that are traded. And that's sometimes happening 100 times more than the actual object is being traded. So this, that's one of those things where it's fine until all of a sudden one day it's not fine. And then things that you never thought possible start happening. And, this kind of gives a sneak peek into the instability of markets as a whole as to what is actually possible and how things can just take an absolute nosedive.
Well, and it essentially, made it go to a halt. It's one of those things that if you have something that is essentially profitable, that, normally oil is one of those things that, trade-wise is profitable when it goes back and forth, and it's pretty consistent when it comes down to like staying at a certain number and how it moves and whatnot. But like at this point, there's almost, not very much demand for oil to begin with, which is already, making that toll. And now all these reserves that, we have are already full. And I was just reading how there's 25 or 27 tankers that are all off the coast of Southern California and Long Beach. And they're all just waiting to unload oil, and they've been waiting for weeks now.
Yeah, that's something I've been hearing about.
Or not weeks, but I mean, they've been waiting for, I think a week, but that basically people are getting really uneasy because these ships haven't moved.
Yeah, that's it. There's some type of trade that people will do. So those tankers, I'm sure they can hold massive amounts of oil. I don't even want to try and take a guess. Thousands and thousands of barrels, I'd imagine. So what people actually do, I hear talk of this trade a lot, where they'll rent the tankers, for thousands of dollars every month, and then they'll fill them up, and they'll just let those tankers are meant for transporting oil country to country across the seas, but they'll rent them and they'll fill them up, and then they'll just sit on them and pay the rental fees month by month, in the hopes that the oil is going to go up. And there's a lot of people doing that right now, and there's a lot of tankers that are just sitting there full. And, who knows really if that trade is going to pay off. There's so much oil just sitting in containers right now, that if we really need to see this demand start picking up, or maybe even those bets are going to not end up being profitable. And, for sure, we're going to have to see some oil production cuts, probably from every single country. And this is another one of those things where people are just trying to take advantage of this crisis. Russia and Saudi, they're, the US shale we've just fucked them so hard by coming out with this shale and then printing all these dollars to support it, so we can have our own oil market, which is absolutely not profitable in any way, shape, or form. And then they're finally trying to get their revenge on us by just flooding the market with oil at a time where nobody even needs oil. And you know what? There's going to be blood in the streets. There's going to be bankruptcies. I heard the rig count in the U.S., the shale rig count, it was about 1,000 before this. Last I heard, had dropped down to 600 already, and that's probably going down even more now. And there's nobody investing in oil companies right now. The shale industry requires a consistent flow of investors. Unfortunately, naive investors have been propping this bullshit up for the past several years. Pension funds, 401ks, all these people that should be investing in stable things. And you know what? These guys are just going to tank, and likely because these oil companies are Trump's voter base. We're going to see huge bailouts for them, which is just another addition to the moral hazard. We're bailing out something that has not been profitable for a decade or more, and yet we're going to bail them out even more. It's just ridiculous. I think the oil market is going to be one of the biggest indicators of instability in the future.
Well, yeah, and I mean, it's like that, like you said. I mean, if you were down to 600, like just when it comes down to it, like the way that the Trumpies look at it is, like, okay, so it looks like it's not profitable, but all these people have jobs right now, and that's what matters. Which, in a sense, yeah, but if it's costing the U.S. people, the citizens, hundreds of thousands of dollars because we're the ones, bailing them out, then when it comes down to it, like, they're what's it called? Their point isn't in the right place. Like their heart's not in the right place. They're not looking out for, the everyday American, and they're not looking out for those people that are trying to stay afloat right now. They're looking to try to keep all these big oil companies, all these big banks, all these companies that are kind of, flapping their wings right now, trying to stay, above the water. And those are the people that are getting paid out, and they're getting their back scratched a little bit just because it's like one of those, here, we'll give you this, just wait it out. Like, don't worry. And that's kind of what they, even did to the American people, but even on a, like, 100 times lower level, where it was just like, okay, we're going to give everybody $1,200, chill for a second. And it's just really ironic how after, there's people that still haven't got their stimulus checks yet. There's states talking about reopening May 1st, reopening May 15th. And it's just, it's not all about the business, and it's not all about the money, because if we reopen everything and, everything goes back to normal, we're going to see a decline, like, twofolds over. It's going to be what we got. But, like you said, this second wave it really all is based off of how we react to this first wave, and especially how we react to the initial, like, slowdown. It is summer. We're going to get a lot less of people going out this summer. But when it comes down to it, like, people are going to want to get out. People want to get, like, moving. They want to get life back to regular. And I just don't want to see it turn out where we end up in a situation that, almost Italy was in, like, to where you couldn't, we can't drive from city to city. You have cities on complete lockdown, and just, it just sucks that they're not working out for the American people.
If we had the lockdowns that they had in Italy, oh my gosh, there would just be straight riots in the street, because they basically took away everybody's liberties. It's been a pretty soft quarantine going on here, especially in Utah. I'm sure New York shit's gotten pretty serious, but I was listening to a podcast, and this lady in Bergamo, the place where it's really going down hard in Italy, the epicenter, and she was saying, it kept getting worse and kept getting worse, and then they eventually said, everyone stay at home, and you could still walk around your neighborhood a little bit, go on runs, and eventually they said nobody can do that anymore either. You had to be within 200 meters of your house, and they only let 3 people in to grocery stores at a time, and they had somebody following you around in hazmat suits, spraying down everything you touch and wiping it. It's been a totally different experience for them in Italy. Probably because they've seen a lot of deaths, and like I said, I think the second wave is really going to be where we start seeing things like that all across the US. And it's just simply because people haven't gotten respect for this yet. They haven't really been hurt by it enough to respect it. So in my mind, it basically just guarantees that the second outbreak is going to be much worse than the first, or it may not be, and we just kind of continue at this slow economic pace. Governors of states, they may not really be dumb enough to open. So in my opinion, I think opening things up now in any state, basically any country in the world, fully opening things up right now, I think would be a pretty dumb thing. But there's a lot of talk of it, and I'm hoping it's kind of just more of the same of trying to keep businesses looking optimistically into the future, and thinking, oh, it's almost over. As long as it's almost over, then I can feel good about it. As long as in 2 weeks we're going to be out of this, then I'm fine and I can wait. As long as it's almost there. I'm hoping that all the governors are kind of just trying to trick people and say it's almost there, just to kind of keep their spirits up. In some states, though, I really think that they are actually really starting to open up. I know several counties in Utah said on Friday, which was a couple days ago, I believe, several counties were starting to open up. And yeah, the virus is everywhere. It's everywhere. It's in every state. It's in every county. What do you think is going to happen? We don't have herd immunity or anything close to it. There was one study that came out that said they tested a certain number of people, and a good percentage of them came up with these antibodies. And then Chris Martenson just tore that study to pieces about how it was just absolutely biased. They got the wrong people coming in, and the tests weren't even accurate. The margin of error on the tests could have accounted for every single positive test in that study. And you know what? I actually unfollowed a lot of people on Facebook just for my own mental health, because I just don't want to be arguing with these people. But I guarantee that study just made the rounds, dude. Just went around on Facebook saying, oh, look, this new study shows that a large percentage of people have already had the virus, way more than we thought. And so it's probably already made its way through our population. And the death toll is probably way lower than we thought. And, we're already probably pretty close to herd immunity. And everything that I'm seeing is not pointing to that. So that basically means we still have all this dry tinder. Let me go back to the numbers here real quick. So we have less than 1 million cases in the US, and we have 350 million people. So that means well under 1% have gotten it, and you need 80%, or we'll go with 60. You need at least 60% of people to have it to get herd immunity, and we are at under 1%. So that means there's all of these people just waiting there to get it, just waiting for things to open. You have one sports event, you get 50 people sick at that one event. I think we haven't even seen anything to come, and people are already tired. I think the only route we have to go from here, it might be a couple more weeks out, but I think people are going to get desperate when it finally hits people's their mind that, oh my God, we don't know how this is going to end. Nobody has any idea how this is going to end. When that really hits people's mind, we're going to see stock market crashes. We're going to see civil unrest. We're going to see another round of panic buying that far outweighs the second one, or the first one that we saw.
What's funny too is you see like in these protests and stuff that they keep showing that there's a lot of Americans like show up with their, their rifles and their AKs and their guns and shit, and it's like, okay, so you're showing up to protest to make them open the state, but why the hell are you bringing a gun? Like, if anybody's going to try to control you, that would be the people of that state or the police of that state. And it's like, I don't know, it's like sending the wrong message, especially with people, the way that they are protesting and the way that just the gatherings of people and that they're trying to promote it on Facebook. I know Facebook has taken a lot of steps to minimize the amount of pages and groups that involve protests and protests and and I mean, they're kind of doing it all around the board, but a lot of these are still getting through. A lot of these are just word of mouth or people on email lists or whatever. Somebody they know from work that is fed up with not getting paid and not going to work, that and you get up to 5,000 people or so at this protest, that over half of them aren't wearing masks, and then most of them aren't keeping 6 feet, then potentially it's another situation like we've seen with the missionaries coming home and everybody being gathered in that one place, and then all of a sudden they had an entire family that was sick from that. They had, I think, 15 other students or missionaries that were out were all tested and came up positive. So I mean, it's just one of those things where, like, if it's not going away and it's not showing signs of really much improvement, it is showing signs of being steady. But with that, that doesn't mean to let your guard down, because I mean, to begin with, America was already caught with their pants down.
Exactly. And I mean, even the signs that it's showing steady are questionable, because I'm looking at the total tests here in the US, 5.4 million. That's still like 200,000 a day. So we're testing 0.01% of the population every day. And, we're testing we've tested just over 1% of people in the US. So really, we have no idea what this virus is actually doing. Probably the strongest indicator we have is the serious or critical case count, which I've touched on a little earlier in the show. And luckily we haven't been seeing that go up too much. So yeah, if there's anything we can rely on, it's probably that, because if it was really, really spreading, then we would see that go up massively. But let's touch on a couple other things I wanted to touch on. Gold, it hasn't really been moving around too much. We are basically at the multi-year high. We're chilling at about 1730, and the high in the past couple of years was 1740. So it's made up everything that it lost on its downturn. Now, when the stock market crashes again, that's going to be very interesting to watch gold, because that's when people are really going to start to feel unsafe with bonds and with stocks. And you know what? Gold's probably going to crash a little bit. It seems to follow in line with the stock market pretty well. Cryptos are probably going to crash a little bit. But then what happens after that pullback and how big that pullback is really going to show the strength of these true safe haven assets like gold. Gold's the number one safe haven asset out there, the undeniable, indisputed champion of preservation of wealth. And I also think I'm hearing a lot of things about Bitcoin. I'm actually about to get myself into some pretty soon here, just because it's an asymmetric bet. That's one thing I'm starting to learn as I'm getting into investing, is you want to look for asymmetry, where there's the downside's possible, yes, but the upside is way more possible. And that's exactly what we're looking at here with gold. The downside, sure, it might go down 10% for a little while. It's not going to stay down there. It may go down 20% for a little while. But your upside, gold could literally go up to 5,000. It could go up to 10,000 when we're talking about inflation possibilities. So we're talking about a possible downside of 20% and a possible upside of 1,000%. Those are the types of things you want to be looking to put your money in. Asymmetry. And it's the same story with cryptos. Sure, it could, Bitcoin could probably go down about 50%. In worst case scenario, 50%. Best case scenario, it could go up 1,000%, 10,000%. If the dollar starts losing value, if people realize that the dollar is actually worth nothing and start going to real safe haven assets. Right now, people think bonds are safe haven assets, but that they're getting negative yields, actual negative yields in a lot of countries, and real negative yields even in the US. If you consider inflation, bonds are paying you like 1% or less every year that you lend them money. Really, the only reason you're giving money to bonds is because you think that the US government's good for it. If it turns around one day that it's not good for it, then there's really nothing behind that. And they're going to keep printing more and more money. I think we're going to see this wound up spring of inflation that's been wound up so tightly over these past decade, where inflation has mostly gone to asset prices. But I think, especially if we see supply chain shortages, I know I've talked about this in past shows. I mean, inflation is in our future for sure. The only question is, what's the time frame? Is it going to be kind of a slow inflation, or is there going to be some breaking point where it starts to inflate? And then once it starts to inflate, we start to see people ditching the currency even more, and it just becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And likely we're going to see that in every currency across the world. So I will go ahead and say it. Actually, it's not a good idea to recommend things to people, but I'm going to be buying gold. I think it's an extremely wise decision if you have extra money to buy gold and silver. First of all, if you can get your hands on it. I know the US Mint shut down and several mines and refineries are shut down because of the coronavirus. So there's all these supply chain disruptions in the precious metal trading market. But if you can get some, get it. You absolutely will not regret it. It's bound to make new highs very soon, or possibly be the one thing that actually serves as your lifeboat through all of this. Okay, so we touched on. Is there anything you want to talk about in that aspect, CJ?
I mean, from my personal viewpoint, and I mean, like you said, it's not like, I mean, we could recommend what we want. I mean, it's up to you guys to do whatever you'd like to do. But in a a long-term standpoint, or even a short-term standpoint, if you're planning on holding on to this stimulus money just to give yourself a little cushion, or just in case, if you are doing okay, or you were doing okay before said check, then why not turn that $1,200 into an investment that it's not going to move. You never know when that dollar is going to start losing value, like, drastically, and if that starts happening, then that money in your account is still going to say the same number. It's just going to be worth a hell of a lot less when it comes down to the global markets. And when it comes down to it, if you were to invest in gold directly, then that's something that it's not going to lose its value. It's something that can't physically change. It's not it's basically however much is in the market is what's in the market. If they all of a sudden, I think we said before on a previous show, like, if all of a sudden the Earth was hit by an asteroid that was filled with gold, then maybe it would lose its value a little bit. But I don't see anything like that happening anytime soon in our lifetime. And with that, if you're just going to let this money sit in a savings account, or hell, like, in your sock drawer or under your mattress, then why the hell not turn it into something that you could put in your sock drawer or mattress, and wake up a month from now and have that grow anywhere from 10 to 20%, with the possibility of it dropping from 5 to 10%.
Well, I mean, really, gold, the potential growth of gold is, I would say, at least 10 times, 10, 20, 30 times, depending on how bad the dollar performs. And there's kind of this, the whole perception of gold has slowly been changing since the 70s. So back in the 70s, everybody knew that gold was money and that it had value. But now in today's world, if you bring up gold, most people don't even really consider that as like a monetary thing, and unfortunately that has kind of taken away some demand. Nobody is really, the average person is just not interested in gold because they don't understand the true value that it has, and that it holds value and has held value for 5,000 years. So in a sense, that the fact that perception has changed, which is a lie, basically. People just don't know. They just don't get it. So that means it's another one of those things that's a wound up spring that's pushed so tight that if it just springs back the other way and everybody all of a sudden realizes the truth, the actual truth, that gold is a scarce resource, that is a monetary resource that's worth a lot of money. I mean, that it could just, what we saw in the oil markets, how it went down to negative. I mean, that is a real good indicator of what we could see in the gold markets, going up. They could double in a day or something. I'm not ruling that out. I'm not ruling that out because of how volatile things are and because of how tightly wound things are. It could double in a day, or it could go up by 5 times in a year or two. It's absolutely insane. And then especially if you consider the things that I'm hearing about the paper gold market, which, I'm hearing numbers tossed around that there's like 100 owners to every one of these, every ounce of gold out there, but that the people don't actually ask for that gold to be delivered to them. They're just trading on the price of gold. So nobody is actually asking for that gold. So, they can, so the analogy that I've heard is basically, if you're living in New York and you only need a car like once a month, maybe, but you want to own a car, so you buy a car from this guy, but you tell him you can hold on to it. Okay, so he's like, all right, you bought this car for me. I still have it, but wait, hold up. Why can't I just sell it to another guy too? And sell it to another guy and sell it to another guy? Because as long as none of them are asking for it at the same time, I can sell this car to multiple people and get tons of money from selling this one single car to multiple people who all think they own it. So that's basically exactly what's happened in the gold market. Is they've sold single ounces of gold multiple times, and then these people are trading on this gold price. And that's exactly what happened in the oil market. Is people had no intention of taking delivery of this oil, but yet they want to make money on the trades. That's what's happening in the gold market. And it's this, so there's this huge trading volume of gold that technically doesn't exist. So if there's, I don't know what could happen with that, but that's not stable. That's just not stable, period. If there's a hiccup in that, oh my God, we could see the whole thing come down. We could see a run on the bank of people asking for their gold. And, only a small percentage of people have to ask for their gold to be delivered. And then, people start saying, oh, wait, we don't have it. And then they hear from somebody else, they don't actually have it. And then that news spreads. And then the whole thing, the whole paper gold market just stops working entirely. And then whoever has physical gold in their hand wins. And that that's going to happen at some point. Well, I guess we can't guarantee that. If this kind of goes smoothly through the virus, but as things seem to be getting worse and worse and worse, that event is pretty likely that whole charade of the car salesman trying to sell the car to hundreds of people for one single car, that charade has got to end at some point. And then gold could potentially become way more valuable overnight.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we've been going for quite a while here. I'd like to thank any listeners that's still hanging on. But before we go ahead and end here, I want to touch on this New York Times article a little bit. I've been hearing this from multiple sources. Basically, This one says here 36,000 missing deaths in just the past month. And this is based on all these graphs that are comparing deaths that's happening this year to how many deaths happened last year. And this is usually a very stable number. Normally, the amount of deaths a city will experience one month is fairly similar to the amount of deaths it experienced last year and the year before and the year before. And every single one of these countries and states and cities is seeing this huge spike. And that spike does not account for the deaths that are being counted. So the deaths that are being counted count for maybe half of this spike. So that suggests that there's basically 20, 30, 40% more deaths that's happening that are basically either not being tested, or it's like some kind of like suicide thing or something, which, maybe we could even count that for the virus. But basically, there's tons of deaths that's happening, whether that's untested or it's some other thing. But basically, every single country and state in the world is seeing way higher deaths than they've seen in previous years. And also, we've been hearing a lot of stuff about Kim Jong Un, which is mostly, it all just seems really up in the air. Nobody really knows exactly what's going on, but this could have major political implications. Did you have anything to say about that, CJ?
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of been trying to find a reliable source to get some sort of information on exactly what's been going on, but from my understanding, out of picking through probably about 30 articles, um, and even just watching about it on the news, I mean, it's to my understanding that he's either in a state where he's brain dead or he has already died. I know that they're trying to make this claim that he's okay and yada yada, but I know that his father died from a heart attack and heart complications and heart surgery, and it's kind of the same route he was going for being a heavy smoker and already had a lot of health issues, and he wasn't in the greatest of health. So I mean, I pretty much speculate that he's regardless not in the greatest of health and probably not in a very good state where he could even run the country. I mean, I think that they might try to, sugarcoat it a little bit and make it seem like he's doing all right. They're just, there's just this or just that, but eventually the truth's going to come out, and there's either going to be a giant funeral in the country, and they're going to make this huge, decision on whether they're going to, put his sister that's been basically put up the next one in line, or so it seems, or, is it going to be the end of this regime that is, completely isolated and cut off from the world via, every single source, whether it be internet or phone or, mail. Once you're there, you're basically stuck there, and there's very few people that have even been and have come back, or have been and survived and came back, let alone, just experience living there. And even on top of that, they've had, several news stations and several other different places have, gone to the country, and they put on this charade and this mask just around where all these people are visiting, so that way it seems like it's this perfectly ran country that has this, amazing military, and all the kids are happy and singing, and they all love their leader and yada yada. But when in perspective, you essentially have millions of people that are probably there suffering from, hunger and famine and just general, like, being mistreated. I'm sure that there's plenty of sick people there with coronavirus that, that's one of those countries that we have no idea. They could potentially be the source of the outbreak. We know that China has communications with North Korea and does work closely with them, and China is also one of those countries that are trying to give this charade that he's okay. But on the other hand, you have places like South Korea that have spoken with certain people inside and have leaks and whatnot, and they're basically saying that this guy's not fit to run the country. So it's going to result in some real big changes, especially during this time. I mean, you got to think that that would be like if our president and vice president both died right now. Like we would have to throw the Speaker of the House in office or whatever. But I mean, it would just turn into a shit show because people are going to be like, okay, cool, this person that's been doing shit wrong the whole time is now out of office. We're the majority, and I really do see it resulting in some sort of revival of the North Koreans, the citizens themselves, not the government at all, and they're gonna I think they're gonna uprise and they're gonna try to form some sort of democracy, which would be awesome, but it's gonna be a hell of a road. And I mean, I expect if he's dead, it's gonna be a good like 5-year recovery from everything they've gotten through, and they will never recover from the time that they've lost with not communicating with the rest of the world.
Yeah, so basically it's quite the mystery right now. I haven't seen anything definitive, so we will stay up to date on that. Something we've talked about in previous shows is potential of wars and geopolitical tensions and conflict. And you know what? This is one of those things that could potentially set something off like that. And I'm not going to pretend to understand the full implications of what this could mean. I mean, who knows? Maybe it'd be a good thing. Maybe a better leader could come in, and maybe this would actually relieve some tension. So, or it could be a thing that sets off major, where there's already a lot of tension between China and the U.S. And I know North Korea is kind of allied with China, and there's a lot of sketchy things going on there. So, yeah, we will keep an eye on that, and we will be one of the first ones reporting it as soon as any real official data comes out about that. So I believe that's everything we have here. So I want to thank.
I was gonna throw one more thing out there. I just wanted to see if you had heard about it. I was just watching a news special about just military tactics and whatnot, and they are just how they're acting now and how they're keeping our military clean and not testing everybody like around the clock basically, and keeping everything on their toes. And I was really personally, I mean, just from one standpoint, I was really impressed. And obviously they've been taking a lot of steps to ensure that our military is taken care of. But they also mentioned that we've had several issues with Russia, where in times that they've actually started challenging us in the last 2 weeks, in a sense, where we've had to have our military jets take off and escort planes away from the coast of Alaska just because they were taunting us. And they've literally done it, I think he said 15 times. So I mean, right now, I mean, it's definitely not the time to be throwing a mouse in front of a cat.
Yeah, and all of this just keeps reminding me of what we saw in the oil market, where it's just like everything's stable, it's stable, it's stable, and then something just comes through and sets a whole new standard and just breaks all those perceptions down. And that's kind of how the world is with militaries. Is everyone's kind of all the markets are just trading on the belief that there's going to be stability and that no one's going to be killing each other. But you think about it, at any point, any country could drop bombs, could send planes, could send tanks, and the whole market just goes up in flames at that point. Not trading doesn't matter at that point. If people are killing people, then what we considered to be the norm is just no longer relevant. And that's the type of breaking point that could potentially happen, especially in a fourth turning society, which we are now. But obviously we're not going to hope for anything like that. But also, if anything happens like that, I'm not going to be one of the people that gets caught off guard. I am going to be considering these things personally. A lot of people would call that negative. Well, I don't care personally. I think it takes a very positive person to be able to dive into such negative topics and still keep their wits about them, to keep their sanity. And I think that's something that we could all learn. If you're a truly positive person, then embrace these negative possibilities. Okay, these are volatile times we're in, with all this tension going around in the world, all this instability in markets and in debts. And also, there's climate change lurking around the corner, holding the gun at our head potentially. You can't just ignore all that stuff, and you can't just be a positive person and just pretend like all that doesn't exist. Otherwise, you are going to be the one that gets caught off guard. So I think with that, we'll end on somewhat of a positive note there. So I just want to thank everyone for listening, and I'm glad to have this conversation with you again, CJ. Hopefully, we can have a bunch more good things in the future. Anyone who wants to join in on the show, help us out. We're looking for help for people to bring up topics and stuff. Find us on Facebook, like we said, and we hope to see you guys next week.
Yeah, guys, take it easy. Stay safe.